What happens when the symptoms of a virus simultaneously impact every single person on the entire planet, save for a select few? Hey, friends, it's Dennis Nappy II here, and that's exactly what I'm exploring here. I'm working on a new book, a work of fiction. It's my first fiction that I'm putting out there publicly. It's called The Hive, Part 1. The virus, the infected, and the immune. And that's exactly what happens in this story. It was kind of my therapy. I did a lot of writing during the COVID-19 lockdowns, and I was exploring different possibilities and what happens with viruses, obviously. But this virus has a technological twist to it that I think you'll enjoy. So I'm going to read the first chapter of this just as kind of a teaser to get some buzz going about the book. And I'd love some feedback. Let me know what you think of this story so far. So without further ado, here's the introductory chapter debuting here with The Hive. The freezer released a burst of icy wind onto Edward's bare arms. The icy chill froze the tiny blonde hair on his arms and then quickly melted to a fine misted dew as the warm summer air mixed with the chilled, frosted air. He reached in, grabbed a gobbler's frozen dinner, and placed it in his small shopping cart, allowing the freezer door to close freely with a thud. Down the next aisle he went, scanning his list on his phone. The Shop Smart grocery app directed him to proceed 3 aisles down, where he would find the eggs on the left. Edward watched as the blue dot floated down the aisles on the screen. Other green dots danced around him, showing him where other in-store app users were located, while red dots were spread throughout his screen, showing Edward where he could find the Shop Smart Self-Help AI Center. As he walked towards the eggs, a woman made her way down the aisle from the opposite end towards Edward. She was a well-dressed woman on a lower middle-class budget. Her bright pink sweats had the word fresh written across her backside in blocky white letters. She wore a sleeveless white tank top and matching crisp white sandals. As she walked past Edward, she slowed and smiled at him as if she had a little secret she was keeping from him. Edward looked up from his phone and they locked eyes. Without warning, she wrinkled her nose, causing strands of her blonde hair to fall in front of her face. Her head tilted back and she sneezed hard, spraying outward and upward. As Edward made eye contact, his face was greeted with the warm mist of spit and snot escaping the woman's nose and mouth. The taste of salt rested on Edward's tongue as his mouth was open to receive the full benefit of the expulsion from the woman's nostrils. Edward blinked his eyes repeatedly as tears filled them to flush the woman's mucus from his eyes. Edward swatted his face, wiping furiously, and scraped his tongue with his fingers, trying to remove all traces of the woman's moist gift. He spit instinctively through his lips, making a gagging sound as he tried to rid himself of it all. The woman hurried away down the aisle, mumbling "sorry" as she cupped her hand over her nose, catching the thick greenish-yellow drippings that were swinging freely. Edward lifted the bottom of his shirt to his face and wiped hard. He stuck out his tongue and wiped harshly on his shirt. "Just my luck," he muttered. As he continued down the aisle, his phone began to pulse lightly in his hand, indicating he was close to the eggs. When he reached the spot, the phone hummed steadily for about 2 seconds, and then all went still. Edward grabbed the eggs, placed them in his cart, and watched a thin red line cross them off on his digital list. His phone emitted a pleasing chime with a reaffirming buzz as the eggs were placed in the cart. At the end of the aisle, he turned and made his way towards the checkout scanner. "Achoo!" he heard from behind him as a man sneezed hard. Edward flinched, still tasting the salt from the last sneeze on his tongue. Then, coming from the aisle to his right, he heard another "chew," followed by several more throughout the store. People were sneezing in unison, and with each sneeze, 3 more followed. There was weight behind those sneezes, not just air passing through their nostrils, and Edward shuddered as the sneezing continued. Throughout the store, a collective sniffle was heard, echoing, repeating, and growing in number and strength. People were covering their faces as long flows of the greenish-yellow mucus and snot hung from their noses and drained from their mouths. They began coughing and choking on their snot, and not a single person seemed unaffected. They were crouching over their carts, spraying their thickness over everything and everyone near them. Edward covered his mouth with his shirt and pushed his cart towards the exit. As he ran towards the front of the store, he shoved whatever he could grab in his cart, dodging multiple convulsing patrons. People were falling to the ground, choking and coughing violently. Everyone around him was sick, and Edward ran faster towards the door. His cart smashed into the crash bar, bursting the door open in front of him as he emerged into the bright sunlight. Relief surged through him as the sun warmed his face and bare arms. But seconds later, the sneezing continued as it spread throughout the parking lot. Shit, Edward thought. Terrorism. He ran towards his car, pushing the shopping cart and holding his breath. He opened his trunk and threw the contents of the cart into the back, then pushed it hard down the parking lot, not watching as it crashed into one of the parked cars a few spots down. Edward jumped in his car, started the engine, and threw it in reverse. He swerved backwards and reversed through the lot, not wanting to waste time turning around among the infected. "I'm not coughing yet," he said out loud. "Maybe I'm not infected." But no sooner had he said those words, he recalled catching that sneeze on his tongue. He froze for a moment and held his breath as he slammed over the curb into the street. Fortunately, all traffic had stopped and for the most part pulled over. Edward threw the car into drive and sped down Sansom Street. The cars lining the side of the road all had the same event occurring within. Passengers doubled over with yellow goo spewing from their mouths and noses, covering their windows and windshields as the occupants shook, choked, and gagged. Edward arrived home within a few minutes, pressed his remote to open the garage, and sped inside, immediately closing the door behind him. He undressed in the garage, leaving his clothing on the floor next to his vehicle. He burst through the door into his kitchen and ran naked straight to the bathroom. He turned on the shower and grabbed his toothbrush and toothpaste as he jumped under the ice-cold water. Edward turned on the hot water as his body had a wave of goose pimples ripple down his arms and legs from the cold assault on his skin. As the crisp, cool water ran down his stomach, arousing another wave of goose pimples, his testicles shrunk into a tight lump between his legs. Edward opened his eyes and let the water flush them out. He opened his mouth and spat out mouthfuls of water at the floor and then cupped his hands and sniffed several huffs of water through his nose, coughing and sneezing out clear snot and water. The faucet warmed and Edward's goose pimples melted back into his skin. He closed his mouth and let the warm water run down his face. He opened the toothpaste and squirted some of it in his mouth. Edward brushed his tongue forcefully and then his teeth, spitting several times and rinsing with the warm shower water. Edward turned up the temperature and let the shower fill with steam. He sat on the floor and lifted his head towards the faucet as the water splashed his naked body. He sat there waiting for the snot to consume him and choke him like the other shoppers. Eventually, the water began to run cold. Edward stood up and turned it off. His hands had pruned. He stepped out onto the cool tile floor. Steam rose from his feet as he wrapped his towel around his waist and walked into his bedroom, where he fell face down onto his bed. His eyes grew heavy, and he fell fast asleep. When he awoke, the room was dark. He hadn't moved an inch. Edward grabbed his phone and immediately checked his social media account. The feed was quiet. Nobody had posted an update in 5 hours, which was an eternity in the realm of cat videos, food pics, and location check-ins. He switched to a news app to find the headline he was searching for. Global virus hits billions. Billions, he thought? There's only 7 billion people on the planet. The article continued. The CDC reports there is no known cause for the sudden onset of the mysterious virus. Oddly, the entire planet seemed to manifest symptoms at exactly the same time. During a typical viral outbreak, the virus spreads from an initial hot zone with patient 0 and then gradually spreads throughout society, depending on the intensity of the containment measures. For symptoms to manifest globally at the same time is unprecedented and gives suggestion to a coordination of disbursement on a very sophisticated level. It also suggests that populations were infected days, if not weeks ago. At this point, there's no way to trace the infection back to a patient 0, so finding a cause and possible cure would be far more difficult. Reported symptoms as we know it so far start with a runny nose and cough, quickly escalate. You may experience the following: severe headache, heavy mucus, choke and cough, body ache, vomiting, diarrhea, and bleeding from all mucous membranes to include the eyes and ears. At this time, there's no known cause or cure. Stay home and stay inside to await further guidance. Edward sat up and propped his phone on the bed. Why am I not sick? He wondered. She sneezed right in my mouth. I have to be infected. But he felt great. Scared out of his mind, but great. He got up and walked to the window. The street was quiet and dark. Cars were left open and abandoned with spews of snot and mucus spread throughout. People were lying in their cars and on the roadway, some motionless, some barely moving. Were they all going to die? Time would tell, but this was going to be a very long night. Edward got dressed, walked back to his kitchen and into the garage. He opened the trunk and grabbed all of the supplies he managed to get out of the grocery store earlier. He had enough where he could hold up inside for about a week, After that, he knew he'd eventually have to venture back outside again and risk contamination, or slowly starve to death in his living room. All right, friends, there you have it. That's the first chapter, and it devolves from there. So I'd love to hear your thoughts and some feedback on the story. Don't pull any punches. You check for updates on my YouTube channel, here on Facebook, and at sixthsensemedia.net. I'm Dennis Nappy II, reminding you, let your intuition be your guide. Thanks.